Yeah, so my first two deals were wholesale transactions. So I was
Okay.
able to, through my own direct to seller marketing campaigns, was able to find some properties and sell them to, quote, end buyers. Let me be honest though, it was real easy because my end buyer was my husband and his business partner who were flipping homes,
Mm,
right? So that was a
nice.
very like, oh, let's get our toe wet. Um, then I realized as I continued trying to wholesale just how difficult it really was. I have to give it to wholesalers. It's a grind, right? Not only are you finding the property, but then you are also finding a stable end buyer, right, who is actually interested in the property. It's a lot of work. And I wasn't in love with that transaction, right? And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to keep sending out these massive marketing campaigns and really doing the wholesale process. So I kept getting leads, right? But I thought instead of like wholesaling these properties, what if I keep them for myself? My confidence was growing, right? As I had more conversations with sellers. I was like, maybe I buy one of these and I keep it as a rental or potentially flip it. And so the next two opportunities that really kind of landed in my lap were properties that I knew from where they were located were better rentals as opposed to flips. Like when you look
Hmm.
at the neighborhood, it was a neighborhood of renters, right? Not of
Hmm.
homeowners. So I knew right off the bat that okay, the exit strategy here needs to be, to hold as a long-term rental. So that's what I did. The next two, one was a single family, the next one was a 7 unit. I think that was a mistake, maybe. It was a little bit too big for my britches. I still own it today, right? And I'm still working through, the challenges every single week. But I really enjoyed the renovation process, right? And I
Hmm.
think that was even a learning as well because here I am, new to real estate. I know it's not HGTV status, but I'm still wanting to make these properties beautiful, right?
Yeah.
But I'm in renter neighborhoods where I don't need, right, the beautiful ceramic tile, right? And it's like the type of rehab that makes the most sense for these types of properties was a little bit different. So I think another lesson, right? I overspent on the rehab, right? Because I'm trying to make properties almost better to some degree than they needed to be for the exit strategy that I was leveraging, right? So I can
Yep.
say, yeah, I probably spent a little bit too much money on those initial rehabs because I just didn't really understand what was the best way to do it. But that's a part of the journey, right? As a real estate
Absolutely.
investor is learning, the kind of the quality of repair that's needed depending on the exit strategy that you're using.
Yeah. And I did the same thing in the beginning too. And that you realize that you just don't get any return on investment for anything above a certain level in certain neighborhoods. And I think a lot of my listeners are probably familiar with the town that you bought that in because a lot of my listeners are from the Chicago area.
Okay.
And I read your blog article about that 7 unit that you bought in Calumet City,
Yeah.
Illinois, which
Thank you.
is yeah, it was a great article, by the way. If others want to read that, it's at bcbcollective.net, and which is Tess's website. And it was great because it shares the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there was all of it, which is typical on a deal, especially one that's the thing that impressed me is you bought it for $25,000. So
Yeah.
anytime you could pick up a 7 unit for 25 grand, there should be some meat on the bone there to make it work. But I'm sure there's a ton of lessons learned as well. And I was curious, I guess, maybe if you could share a little bit more about how that deal played out and why you decided at the end that it's not one that you would probably do again.
So, yes, I did buy the building for 25 grand, which I'm sure people are like, that doesn't even make sense. And it
Yeah.
doesn't really make sense. How I bought it was I assumed a tax lien. Okay. Pretty big one in the amount of $130,000. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So when you put that into the equation, right, it's like I really bought it for what, if I could do math, 155. right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. And
and
can you explain what a tax lien is too for people who aren't familiar
sure,
with that?
sure. So when homeowners don't pay their property taxes, right, for a certain amount of time, those taxes go up for sale for investors to purchase, right? And to quickly explain it, when an investor does purchase, a default taxes, right, or delinquent taxes, they essentially like have rights to the property if they're not paid off in a certain amount of time. Okay, and in the timetable is 2 years. So I knew I had
Hmm.
time on my side, right? So I had a tax buyer, right, who had invested in this property as well, and I knew that the clock was ticking, right? That I had 2 years to renovate, stabilize this unit, refinance it, where I could not call it my own because I was the owner of it, right? But I had this big lien kind of hanging over my head. Um, and I think if I were to do it again, I would have just found the money to pay that lien off from the very, very beginning, from my initial purchase, right?
Mm.
Instead of hold it. And the reason is because when I bought it, the tax lien was only $98,000. So over the
Mm.
course of a year, right, which is how long it took me to, rehab, stabilize, and refinance the building, it grew from 98 to 130,
Got it.
right?
Okay. So just for listeners who to clarify this a little bit. So basically an investor comes in, the owner's way behind, they buy the tax lien, they get an interest rate on the money that they've invested. And the owner has 2 years to pay it off until they basically can take the property. But in that time, the lien is increasing in size.
Correct. Yeah, due to the like
Got it.
massive interest rate, right? That's tied to it. Um,
Yeah.
so it was a risk, right, that I took, and it's definitely a strategy. I actually did that on my first property too, um, and it worked out fine. But still, I would not personally purchase like that again. I would rather just
Yeah.
get rid of those liens from the onset, and call it a clean slate from the beginning. So yeah, so I went to work, right, rehabbing the 7 unit, and I started in the interior, right? Let's get these units renovated so I can increase the rents. I had inherited it with 6 out of the 7 units occupied, right? But the rents were at 500 or less. So I knew I had a lot of opportunity there. I mean, a
Yeah.
renovated unit was going for about 1,000, right? So I knew I could,
Mm.
double down on the income, but I just had to do the work to get there. So I did that. I renovated 5 of the 7 units. I couldn't do the other two because those two tenants stayed, right, and wanted to remain in those units. And I was okay with
And
that.
you just just to clarify, you did this all from Vegas, or were you actually in Illinois doing
Did it
this?
all from Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, which I am still a proponent of. I mean, I do all my investing out of state, but
Hmm.
I will be more hands on moving forward. I did it pretty remotely, relying on my contractors and video footage and pictures, which I've learned again another lesson, right? A picture taken at this angle and then take 5 steps back, there's actually can be a huge difference. you know
That's
um,
true.
so I'm sure you've experienced a little bit of that too.
Absolutely. Yep. It's
So,
amazing how fuzzy those pictures are, but they want to get paid their
oh,
payment.
it's
Yep.
so true. It's so true. Um, so yeah, I mean, I was able to successfully renovate it. For the most part, I started on the interior. I did a few big capital expenditure repairs as well. Um, but I'll tell you, like the building just keeps on giving, right? And not in the way that I want it to give, right? In terms of, things just keep popping up because it is an old building, 1911, right? And
Okay.
and while it's brick and it is a sturdy structure, I had a what am I trying to say? Um, when you go in and have an inspector in, right? So I knew all the
Oh
ghosts,
yeah. Home
right?
inspection. Yep.
Yeah, but they just keep popping up, right? And I'm like, how much longer can I hang on to this thing, right? Until I'm upside
Yeah.
down, and you have to be really careful about the money that you put into these things, making sure that you're able to get your ROI out. And I think that I've learned a lot in this process, understanding where do you start, how to what quality do you rehab, right? What's the next thing that needs to be done versus you want to be done?
Hmm.
And so that in and of itself has been a huge learning curve for me.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And how do you find deals like this? Because you mentioned you were doing some off-market marketing. You're in Las Vegas. You came across this deal in Calumet City. How does that all work?
Yeah, so I was doing, what they call direct to seller marketing. So I was sending out, sometimes it would be text messages, sometimes it would be, ringless voicemail. I specifically, my strategy, and I was coached by a mentor on this. And it's a strategy that I would use again, right? If I decide to do more direct to seller marketing, is the to no surprise, the tax lien list. So it is marketing to those homeowners who are behind on their taxes. I had more positive conversations with homeowners against that list than I have any other list that I've ever worked before. And I've done it all,
Mm,
right? I've done the absentee owner, I've done the vacant list, I've done the high equity list. And, for those who pick up the phone, right, and are willing to have a conversation with me, they're looking for help, right? And when I can
yeah,
step in and help, right, it's there's a mutual good feeling right there. And honestly, I am still friends with the previous owners of the 7 unit of the first single family that I purchased. There's a lot of goodwill and exchange there. I felt like I was really able to help them, through a hard kind of situation that they were going through, and they enabled me to get my feet wet in real estate investing and learn everything that I have today.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's win-win-win. That's what you want. And how did you come across that list, or where does somebody find a list like that?
On the treasurer's website. So comes out every 6 months to a year, depending on the county. It's easier to find, on some treasurer websites than others, but it is a list that is published, right? Depending on the tax sale, right? And that's what you look for is, on the treasurer's website, there's typically an area that talks about a tax sale, and it will tell you when the list comes out. It's like a calendar. It's like clockwork, right? I know to expect it every about May and November in Cook County. And that's when the most recent lists are published. And, you've got to filter them according to the types of investments, right, that you're looking for. But I've met a lot of great people through that type of marketing and been able to help some along the
Hmm.
way.
Yeah. And then, so you get the list then, and do you have a VA that kind of filters it and then sends the text messages or ringless voicemails?
I actually did it all myself. So I'm
Did you?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I wasn't I was new, Kirby, right? I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
deploy any extra capital, right? That wasn't needed,
That's
which
great.
might not be the best thing to do, right? But I wasn't really looking to scale that side of the business. I was just looking to get enough leads every month that would keep my real estate business moving forward.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I skip traced it. I filtered it. I was the one, using the various softwares and platforms to send out those messages legally. I know about the compliance rules and everything that you have to do to make sure you're doing it the right way.
Hmm.
And yeah, that in and of itself is a whole learning, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of trial and error, not to get it right, but just to figure out how to do it easily, right? Without wanting to pull your hair out.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 But I love that you said that, because I have pictures of my wife driving me around at night, putting up bandit signs, standing on the hood of the car, attaching them to telephone poles,
Yeah.
because that was the only thing we could afford in terms of marketing, and it worked.
Yeah.
Like it was very manual. It was me doing all the work, and my wife. She was a getaway driver, but it got the phone ringing with exactly what you said. Like, people who are in a situation, they don't want to list the property on the MLS. they typically have some big problem that they need help solving, whether they're a hoarder or we had one lady that got locked out of her house by the health department because it was so nasty inside. It was a condo unit in a building, and her neighbors were just like so happy that we were able to purchase this from her and fix it up. But
Yeah.
that's the type of stuff you get from these off-market
Yeah.
marketing campaigns that
Mhm.
you're not going to find on the MLS. And sometimes in the beginning, you got to just get out there and do it yourself.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
that's great.
Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing that you did the bandit signs. I would have done the same, but my husband was like, I don't need you in those areas here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
drawing the line. Texting, ringing
Yeah.
voicemail you can do, but I don't need you out in downtown Las Vegas. You know,
Yeah. This was prior to kids too, so I was a little more daring, I think, at the
yeah.
time, adventurous.